Play-by-play.
I love it.
That rabbit hole aside, this chapter is not about the defense against the dark arts. This is not about Quirrell or Voldemort. This chapter is about one of our other antagonists in the book. And of course, you know exactly who I'm talking about. Hagrid. No.
Wait a second.
We do get an invitation from Hagrid for tea, marking Harry's first letter in the wizarding world. Congratulations to him. But that comes right before we officially meet Snape. We're going to talk a lot about Snape today, particularly in the scouting report section, and also beyond that, I think, as well. But for now, we're going to stick to the events in the classroom. In terms of Snape in this chapter, in the book, he's pretty much the worst teacher.
Oh, yeah.
If an 11-year-old student walks away from your class feeling as though you hate him, you're not playing the role of teacher properly.
Oh, no. No.
Now, I know that Snape has defenders, but no amount of social media defender can justify that basic fact. It all starts with Snape doing roll call and taking a shot at Harry as the new celebrity. It wasn't solicited. It wasn't, I guess you would say deserved. It's just a teacher singling out a student in order to make the other kids laugh at him. Right. If Harry walked into class being a class clown and like showing his ass, Snape wanted to take him down a peg. Okay, that's teaching, but that's not what happened, right?
No. He didn't have a chance to say anything.
No, and it's not an isolated incident either, right? No. It's just the beginning. He then proceeds to insult them as a group, acting super snarky, like I'm smarter than you because, duh, you're the teacher. You're supposed to be smarter than children. You're supposed to teach them, make them smarter. Yeah. Not belittling them. Yeah. And of course, bang, again, unsolicited Potter. What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel into a fusion of wormwood? And that's going to come up later too. Again, instead of teaching, he makes fun of Harry for not knowing answers to the question he knew that he wouldn't have an answer to. This is all premeditated, right?
Yes, 100%.
He planned to make Harry feel like garbage the moment he found out he was going to be in this class.
Definitely. I think you hit on a point that I feel like is something a lot of people don't bring up when it comes to Snape, even people who can't stand Snape as a character. Mm-hmm. They're like, he's so mean, he belittles people. I get very stuck on his criticisms of Hermione's appearance, and I think it's in book 4 when he talks about her teeth, like things like that. He's awful. But at the end of the day, on top of that, he's also just a terrible teacher. Like, he doesn't teach anything.
No, and it's funny because everybody says that in book 6, Harry's being taught by Snape through the Half-Blood Prince book. And I kind of sort of agree with the premise, because the only thing Snape is doing as a teacher is writing instructions on the blackboard and saying, make this potion.
Right.
The majority of the times we see him when he's not trying to make Harry feel stupid for not knowing the answers to questions, in which, granted, when he does that, he is informing the class of what the right answers are. He's just doing it in a way that's kind of awful.
Right. But when I think about like great teachers, I mean, even Slughorn is a pretty decent teacher. Mm-hmm. You think about his first class.
He's motivating.
Yes, it's fun. Mm-hmm. He uses the Socratic method. Like, he's a good teacher, even though he's pompous, he's so-and-so.
Yeah, and
Snape's terrible.
Yeah, let's be 100% real about that. Like, every teacher that's a good teacher doesn't have to be nice and fun. Like, you can have strict teachers that are still good at relaying information to you, but they're not bullies, So again, another question, another insulting remark. And on the third question, Harry finally shows a little defiance and says, why don't you ask for Hermione? She's had her hand up, for every single question. The only student with their hand up, and likely the only one that knows the answers. Some are going to say that Draco may have, known the answers, because a lot of people think that Draco was basically second in the class in terms of grades behind Hermione. And maybe he did know the answer to these questions, but Snape's never going to put him in the position to be wrong. and
Oh, right.
his hand.
His
Or
golden
Hermione
boy.
did, right?
Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah. And Snape's behavior doesn't improve throughout this class. He puts him in pairs, criticizes everyone except for Malfoy. He calls Neville an idiot, and when Neville's potion actually physically harms him, instead of perhaps, helping him along the way, he just let him injure himself and embarrassed him in front of the class and had another student, rather than himself, taken to the hospital wing, by the way. And then he blamed Harry for letting Neville get his potion wrong and continued taking points away from Gryffindor for it.
It's absurd. I mean, that
Right.
whole thing when he's like, I'm taking a point away because you didn't tell him not to make that mistake. It's like at that point, any doubt as a reader that you had that all of this was totally intentional and that he wasn't just a grumpy teacher, like, is gone. All that
Right.
doubt's gone.
Right. It's at this point, it's not just incompetent teaching. At this point, it's a blatant attack on a student.
Yeah.
Not as literally as he's going to do in book 6, but an attack nonetheless. He's
For sure.
an awful teacher. He's a very intelligent wizard. So before all the Snape truthers cancel me on social media, you can work for the good guys and still be a crappy person or a crappy teacher.
Absolutely. Right? Yes. Oh, yeah. Yes. Okay. And I mean, just plain mean. And like you said, I mean, a bully. Yeah. That's the best word for him. Yeah.
Yeah. So we can put a pause on Snape for the time being.
Okay.
After class, Ron hitches a ride to Hagrid's for tea and rocks, a cake, or whatever he tries to feed them. He tries to brush off that Snape hates Harry when Harry brings him up, but at this point, I've got to ask, should Hagrid have said anything about this? Because he knows, right? It's a lot to lay on an 11-year-old, but why a grown man, an authority figure, and with this being a boarding school, so truly a parental figure for these children, why this person is singling you out and being, mean to you because he hated your dad? And Hagrid knows.
I love this question. Because like, I'm inclined to say most of the time, I'm very much on the side of people just need to be upfront with Harry. Mm-hmm. I think in this case, there's maybe a happy medium that would have been ideal, which is for Hagrid to say, that's a conversation that we can have like further down the line, mm-hmm. but I really want you to just make up your own mind about him, because I feel like that's why he doesn't tell him, right? Is he's like, I don't want to poison his mind against this guy. I mean, maybe that's why he doesn't tell him. Or maybe Dumbledore's told him not to tell him, but in which case, just F you, Dumbledore. Like
that wouldn't shock me.
Right.
I hadn't thought about that, which is funny because every single episode of this so far has come back to the Dumbledore master plan. And it seems to be the running theme of this entire podcast series. Not that I'm a seer, but I think it's probably going to continue. But I hadn't thought of it as maybe Dumbledore told Hagrid specifically not to. I thought of it more along the lines of like Hagrid didn't want to make Harry like fear Snape in a way, or also have that really uncomfortable conversation with this kid. Right. Like somewhere, teetering on those two things.
That tracks. Hagrid is not a fan of uncomfortable conversations. Yeah. And he doesn't handle them very well.
Yeah.
And I think like if we Occam's razor that's the most likely.
Right. Because he's probably got dirt too. He would have been the groundskeeper during the Marauders era.
Oh, he's
probably seen things that we never see in the series. Like he was probably there for Snape's worst memory. He was probably there for some of the stories that we get little bits about when it's referenced that the two never missed an opportunity to curse each other.
Right.
Like he's probably seen a ton of that firsthand. And I don't know. I think he's probably got some juicy stuff he could have told Harry at any point in time and never did. Not just here, but never did.
He never does revisit it with him. Mm-mm. It never occurred to me that Hagrid is absolutely like the keeper of all of the Hogwarts tea. Like
this is a spinoff that I think everybody everybody wants a Marauder spinoff, but what if that spinoff, and this just popped into my head, so it's probably garbage. What if that spinoff is like through Hagrid's perspective of the Marauder era, like watching all of it?
I love it, because then you're not taking it aside as a storyteller.
The Belated Binge Podcast.